A man ridiculed for years suddenly holds the deed to the most worthless land in town, a rotting swamp. But when experts discover what's buried beneath it, his life changes forever. Before we dive in, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. The laughingstock of Liberty Falls. The humid air of Liberty Falls clung to everything like a second skin, thick with the scent of damp earth and diesel fumes from the lone gas station on the edge of town. Emmett Hayes wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, the frayed sleeve of his work shirt scratching against his skin. Another long shift at Liberty Falls High School had ended. Another evening of mopping floors and scrubbing graffiti off bathroom stalls. The kids had long since gone home, the hallways silent except for the occasional creak of old floorboards settling. Emmett didn't mind the quiet. In fact, he preferred it. The silence meant no sideways glances, no muttered jokes just loud enough for him to hear. For years he'd been the town's favorite punchline. Poor Emmett Hayes, the janitor who couldn't even fix his own life. He locked up the school and stepped out into the fading light, the cicadas already humming their evening song. His rusted pickup truck waited in the parking lot, its passenger seat piled high with unpaid bills and eviction notices. He tossed his keys onto the dash inside. Then came the voice. "Hey, Hayes, heard you finally got yourself some real estate." Emmett didn't have to turn around to know it was Hank Dobbs, the loudmouth trucker who held court at Millie's Diner every morning, spinning tall tales and doling out unsolicited advice. "Swamp plan don't count as real estate, Hank," Emmett muttered, sliding into the driver's seat. Hank barked a laugh, slapping the side of the truck. "Your uncle was crazier than a rabid coon, leaving you that bog. What are you going to do with it? Breed mosquitoes?" Emmett forced a tight smile and turned the ignition. The engine sputtered before roaring to life. "Guess I'll figure out." Hank shook his head, still grinning. "Ain't even fit for gators, Hayes." The words followed Emmett all the way home. The home in question was a single-wide trailer on the outskirts of town, its aluminum siding dented from last year's hailstorm. The landlord, a wiry man named Roy, had taped another notice to the door, "Past due. Final warning." Emmett peeled it off, crumpled it, and tossed it onto the growing pile inside. He didn't bother turning on the lights. Instead, he pulled out the deed from his back pocket and smoothed it against the kitchen table. 50 acres, Blackwater Bog. His Uncle Silas had been a mystery, a recluse who'd lived off-grid, talked to trees, and died without a will. The lawyers had tracked Emmett down as the only living relative. And now here it was, a worthless stretch of muck and misery. A sharp knock at the door startled him. Roy stood on the steps, thumbs hooked in his belt loops. "You got till Friday, Hayes. Then I'm changing the locks." Emmett nodded. He'd heard it before. Roy squinted at the deed in Emmett's hand. "That the swamp land?" He snorted. "Hell, maybe you can live out there. Build yourself a shack. Eat crawdads. Just don't drown." The door slammed shut behind him. The next morning, Emmett drove out to Blackwater Bog, his truck bouncing over potholes on a long-abandoned access road. When he finally reached the property line, he stepped out into ankle-deep water, the ground sucking at his boots. It was worse than he'd imagined. The swamp stretched out before him, a tangled mess of cypress knees and stagnant pools, the air thick with the stench of decay. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds, and somewhere in the distance, a gator bellowed. Emmett's chest tightened. This was it, his inheritance, his big break. He kicked a rock into the murky water and watched it vanish without a ripple. Then the rain started. It came down in sheets, turning the already soggy ground into a quagmire. Emmett stumbled back toward his truck, but not before spotting the old tool shed near the tree line. Silas's, no doubt. The roof had caved in, but maybe there was something salvageable inside. He waded through the rising water, the rain stinging his eyes. The shed door groaned as he forced it open. Rusted tools, moldy tarps, and a single mud-caked shovel leaned against the wall. Emmett grabbed the shovel. As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. Rainwater pooled in the center of the shed's dirt floor, but it wasn't just water. The surface shimmered with an unnatural sheen, rainbow streaks swirling like oil on pavement. He crouched, dipping his fingers into the puddle. When he pulled them back, They were coated in a thick black sludge. Emmett Hayes had spent his whole life being laughed at, but for the first time in years, he smiled. Beneath the muck, Emmett stared at his fingers, the black sludge clinging to his skin like tar. He rubbed it between his thumb and forefinger, the substance thick and stubborn, refusing to wash away in the rain. His heart pounded in his chest, a wild, unfamiliar rhythm. This isn't just mud. He crouched lower, ignoring the rain soaking through his clothes, and scraped the shovel against the ground where the water had pooled. More of the dark, viscous liquid seeped up from beneath the dirt. His breath hitched. Oil? Here? The idea was ridiculous. Liberty Falls wasn't oil country. The big rigs were farther north, where the land was dry and flat. This was just a forgotten swamp, good for nothing but breeding mosquitoes and swallowing dreams. But the evidence was right there, staining his hands. Emmett stood abruptly, his mind racing. He needed answers, real answers, not the mocking laughter of Hank or Roy. He needed someone who knew the land, who could tell him if this was just some weird trick of the swamp or something more. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time Emmett pulled into the parking lot of the Liberty Falls Public Library, a squat brick building with flickering fluorescent lights. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and lemon-scented cleaner. The librarian, Mrs. Langley, peered at him over her cat-eye glasses as he dripped water onto the linoleum. "You look like you wrestled an alligator, Emmett Hayes," she remarked. "Felt like it," he muttered, heading straight for the computer in the back corner. He typed frantically, searching for anything about oil seepage in wetlands, mineral rights in Louisiana, how to test for crude oil without a lab. The more he read, the tighter his chest grew. It was possible. Unlikely, but possible. Then he saw it, a name. Dr. Priya Vasquez, geologist. LSU, visiting researcher. Specializing in hydrocarbon detection. And she was staying right here in Liberty Falls. Finding her wasn't hard. Liberty Falls was a kind of town where strangers stuck out like neon signs. A quick stop at Millie's Diner confirmed it. "Yeah, some out-of-towners been staying at the motel," Millie said, sliding a coffee across the counter. "Real serious lady. Always typing on her laptop." Emmett took the coffee, black and bitter, and made his way to the Liberty Inn, a rundown motel with flickering vacancy sign. Room 12 had a rental car parked outside and a light on behind the curtains. He hesitated, then knocked. The door opened just enough to reveal a woman in her late 30s, her dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail, her sharp eyes assessing him in one quick glance. "Yes." Emmett swallowed. "Dr. Vasquez? I think I found something. On my land. I need you to look at it." Her eyebrow arched. "And you are—" "Emmett Hayes. Clean the high school." For a second, he thought she'd shut the door in his face. But then she sighed, grabbed a jacket, and stepped outside. "Show me." Back at Blackwater Bog, the sun had broken through clouds, casting an eerie glow over the swamp. Dr. Vasquez, Priya, knelt beside the seep, her portable analyzer whirring as she took a sample. Emmett hovered nearby, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "So, is it—" The machine beeped. Priya's expression didn't change, but her grip on the device tightened. "You're joking," she said flatly. Emmett's stomach dropped. "It's nothing, isn't it? Just some weird swamp." "It's not nothing." She stood abruptly, turning the analyzer screen toward him. "This is high-grade crude, Emmett. Light sweet crude, to be exact. The kind refineries fight over." The world tilted. Emmett grabbed the nearest tree, for balance. "But how?" Priya was already pacing, her boots sinking into the mud. Natural seepage. Rare but not unheard of. There could be a reservoir beneath this swamp. A big one. She stopped, fixing him with a look. "Do you have mineral rights to this land?" Emmett blinked. I don't know." Priya exhaled sharply. "Find out. Now." The Liberty County Clerk's office was closed by the time they got back to town, but Emmett's uncle's paperwork was clear. The deed included mineral rights. Priya's eyes gleamed in the dim motel light as she read the document. "You realize what this means, don't you?" Emmett shook his head, still numb. "It means," she said slowly. "You might be sitting on a fortune." A knock at the door shattered the moment. Emmett opened it to find Clayton Boone standing on the motel walkway, his Stetson shadowing his sharp features. Boone didn't bother with greetings. "Hayes, heard you've been poking around your swamp." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'll save you the trouble. I'll give you 50 grand for it. Cash." Emmett's blood ran cold. Boone never offered money unless he knew he could make 10 times more. Priya stepped forward, her voice icy. "The land isn't for sale." Boone's gaze slid to her, then back to Emmett. "Think real careful, Hayes. Swamps are dangerous places. Easy to get lost." Then he tipped his hat and walked away, whistling. Emmett's hands clenched into fists. He'd spent his whole life being pushed around. Not anymore. The wildcatter's gamble. The motel door clicked shut behind Boone, but his presence lingered like the smell of cheap cigars. Emmett stood frozen, his pulse hammering in his throat. $50,000. More money than he'd ever held at once. Enough to pay off Roy, fix his truck, maybe even breathe without the weight of debt crushing his ribs. Priya's voice cut through the static in his head. "Don't even think about it." Emmett turned. She was already packing her gear, shoving the analyzer into a duffel bag with sharp, precise movements. "That man doesn't make offers," she said without looking up. "He makes threats wrapped in dollar bills. If he wants your land, it's because he knows what's under it." Emmett rubbed his temple. "What do we do?" Priya zipped the bag shut. "We prove it's worth more." Dawn painted the swamp in shades of gold and rust as Emmett's truck bounced down the overgrown path to Blackwater Bog. Priya rode shotgun, her knee bouncing with restless energy. In the bed of the truck sat Jeb Rooster Malone, a grizzled wildcatter in the 70s who drilled more dry holes than producing wells in his lifetime. Emmett had found him at Millie's Diner at 5 a.m., nursing a coffee and a grudge against Boone Oil. "Boone stole my last strike back in '92, Rooster had growled, slamming his cup down. "I'll help you poke that swamp full of holes just to spite him." Now, as they unloaded Rooster's battered drilling rig, a Frankenstein's monster of rusted pipes and frayed cables, Emmett fought the urge to laugh. This was his oil empire, a retired driller, a scientist who barely tolerated him, and equipment held together with duct tape and prayers. Priya knelt beside the seep, scraping another sample into a vial. "We'll need to drill at least 50 feet to confirm reservoir size. Quietly, before Boone finds out." Rooster spat tobacco into the mud. "Ain't nothing quiet about drilling, darling." By midday, the rig was assembled, its groaning engine sending birds scattering from the cypress trees. Emmett's hands blistered as he hauled pipe, the Louisiana sun boiling the humidity into a suffocating blanket. Sweat stung his eyes, but he didn't stop. Couldn't. Every turn of the drill bit felt like turning a key in a lock, one that might open a door he'd never dared walk through. Priya monitored the drill's progress on a tablet, her frown deepening with every foot they descended. 20 feet, 30. Then, at 42 feet, the rig shuddered. A guttural whine rose from the earth as the drill bit punched through into empty space. The pipe jerked violently, nearly yanking Rooster off his feet. "Sweet baby Jesus," Rooster breathed. Black liquid erupted from the borehole, spraying high into the air before raining down on them in a sticky, reeking deluge. Emmett stumbled back, wiping his face, his mouth falling open as the geyser roared. Priya was already moving, shoving the collection jar under flow. The analyzer's display lit up like a slot machine hitting jackpot. "Light sweet crude," she shouted over the noise. "At least 5,000 barrels a day." Rooster hooped, dancing a jig in the muck. "We're rich boys, richer than Boone's wildest dreams." Emmett couldn't speak. He just stood there, oil dripping from his hair, staring at the black fountain that had rewritten his future. Then he heard the gunshot. The second shot splintered a tree near Priya's head. "Down!" Rooster tackled Emmett into the mud as a pickup truck barreled through the undergrowth, its bed loaded with Boone's men. Emmett recognized the hulking form of Dale Mercer, Boone's foreman, leaning out the window with a rifle, trespassing on Boone property. Dale bellowed. Priya crouched behind the rig, her voice razor-sharp. This is Hayes' land. Dale's laughter was drowned out by the drill's groan. Not for long. The truck skidded to a stop. 3 men jumped out, their boots sinking into the muck as they advanced. One carried a sledgehammer, another a gas can. Emmett's blood turned to ice. They weren't here to talk. Rooster grabbed a pipe wrench. Well, Hayes, you want to be an oil man or not? The drill's roar filled Emmett's ears. Some men inherited money. Some inherited land. Emmett Hayes had just inherited a war. The siege of Blackwater Bog. The world narrowed to the glint of the sledgehammer in the sunlight, the acrid stench of gasoline, and the thunder of his own pulse in Emmett's ears. Dale Mercer's grin was a yellowed, crooked thing as he motioned for his men, a fan out. Burn it, Dale ordered. The man with the gas can lunged forward, sloshing fuel across the drill rig's base. Emmett moved before he could think. Years of being invisible, of ducking his head, shattered in an instant. He barreled into man's shoulder first, sending them both crashing into the mud. The gas can flew, spraying its contents harmlessly across the reeds. Rooster didn't hesitate. The old wildcatter swung his pipe wrench like a Louisville slugger, catching one of Boone's men across the jaw with a sickening crack. The man dropped like a sack of feed. Priya was already on her phone, shouting coordinates to someone, the sheriff? The state police? Emmett couldn't tell over the chaos. Dale raised his rifle again, aiming straight at the roaring oil geyser. No problem. Emmett saw it in slow motion. The finger tightening on the trigger, the barrel aligning with the pressurized crude. One spark in the wrong place, and the entire swamp would become an inferno. He launched himself at Dale just as the shot rang out. The bullet went wide, shredding through cypress bark instead of steel. They hit the ground hard, Emmett's ribs screaming as Dale's elbow connected with his gut. The rifle skittered away into the muck. You're dead, Hayes. Dale spat, flipping them over with brute strength. His calloused hands closed around Emmett's throat. Should have taken the money. Black spots danced at the edges of Emmett's vision. Somewhere distant, Priya was screaming. The drill rig's engine coughed and died, leaving only the eerie hiss of escaping oil. Then, tires on gravel. Sirens. Dale's grip loosened just enough for Emmett to gasp. Cops. Worse. Came a new voice. Clayton Boone stood at the tree line, his crisp suit untouched by the swamp, flanked by 2 sheriff's deputies. His smile was a knife wound. Environmental inspectors. Priya stepped forward, wiping oil from her face. You're bluffing. You don't have jurisdiction. Boone flicked a business card at her feet. Federal EPA, sweetheart. Got a call about illegal drilling in protected wetlands. He turned to the deputies. Shut it down. Emmett staggered upright, his throat burning. We filed the permits. Priya checked. Permits. Boone chuckled. Hayes, you couldn't afford a fishing license. He nodded to the inspectors. This seep is clearly a hazardous material site. Standard procedure is containment. He stressed the word like a death sentence. Pump cement down that borehole. Today. Rooster lunged, but a deputy caught him. You son Ofa. Priya's hand shot out, stopping Emmett's protest. Her voice dropped to a whisper only he could hear. Wait, look at his shoes. Boone's Italian loafers were coated in the same iridescent muck as theirs. Emmett's mind raced. Boone hadn't just heard about their drill. He'd been here. Recently. Which meant Priya's fingers dug into his arm as she raised her voice. Funny thing, Mr. Boone. We took samples from across the property this morning. She tapped her tablet, pulling up a map dotted with red markers, including from that old hunting cabin you've been using, the one with the pump jack in the basement. The deputies froze. Boone's smile didn't waver, but his knuckles went white around his cane. Priya continued, louder now. Turns out you've been quietly tapping this reservoir for months, which makes you the illegal driller. She turned to the inspectors. Gentlemen, I'd start testing his wells if I were you. Boone moved faster than Emmett expected. His cane whipped out, smashing the tablet from Priya's hands. No one cares what some washed-up geologist thinks. But the damage was done. The deputies exchanged glances. One muttered into his radio. The swamp held its breath. Then from the road came a new sound, engines, dozens of them. Pickup trucks and four-wheelers crested the ridge, headlights cutting to the gathering dusk. Hank Dobbs leaned out of the lead truck, his usual smirk replaced by something harder. Heard there was a party, Hayes? Behind him, half the town of Liberty Falls piled out, armed with wrenches, hunting rifles, and, in old Mrs. Langley's case, a cast-iron skillet. Boone took a step back. This doesn't concern you people. Sure it does, Hank said, spitting tobacco near Boone's shoes. See, we've been paying Boone oil-inflated prices for gas for 20 years. Turns out he was stealing from Hayes' land the whole time. He grinned. That makes it our oil, too. The crowd rumbled in agreement, advancing. The deputies edged away from Boone. Emmett felt it then, the shift in the air, the moment the balance of power cracked. For the first time in his life, Liberty Falls wasn't laughing at him. They were standing with him. Boone's veneer finally shattered. You'll regret this, he hissed at Emmett. I own the courts, the politicians. You'll never pump a drop. Priya retrieved her broken tablet, wiping sludge from the screen. Actually, mineral law is very clear. Surface rights might be tied up in environmental claims, but subsurface? She smiled. That oil belongs to whoever extracts it first. She nodded to the still gushing well. Congratulations, Mr. Hayes. You just became an oil man. Boone lunged, but Hank and 3 others caught him, dragging him back toward a squad car as the crowd cheered. Emmett turned to the geyser, its black spray glittering under the sunset. Some victories were quiet. This one roared. A town reborn. The morning sun rose over Blackwater Bog like a promise kept. The sheriff's department had spent the night hauling away Boone's men, while the federal inspectors, now very interested in Boone's hidden operations, sealed off his illegal wells with bright yellow caution tape. The town of Liberty Falls had stayed through all, passing around thermoses of coffee and telling stories about all the ways Clayton Boone had screwed them over the years. Emmett sat on the tailgate of his truck, staring at the settlement papers in his hands. Boone's lawyers had arrived at dawn with an offer: drop all claims against him, and he'd relinquish any rights to the mineral deposits beneath Blackwater Bog. No lawsuits, no appeals, just a clean break. Priya leaned against the truck beside him, her arms crossed. You know he's only doing this because he's scared. If this goes to court, he loses everything. Emmett nodded. He'd spent his whole life being pushed around, but today he held the power. And it wasn't just about the oil. It was about the people standing behind him, the same ones who'd mocked him for years, now watching with hopeful eyes. He signed the papers. 6 months later, the swamp was unrecognizable. The Hayes Energy Company headquarters, a repurposed hunting lodge, buzzed with activity as engineers and geologists mapped the full extent of the reservoir. The drill site had been expanded, but carefully, with Priya overseeing every step to ensure the wetlands were protected. The real change, though, was in Liberty Falls itself. Emmett had poured the first profits back into the town. The high school got a new roof. The diner expanded its kitchen. The library, once on the verge of closing, now had a brand-new computer lab. And every resident who'd stood with him that day received a royalty check. Hank Dobbs was the first to cash his. He clapped Emmett on the back at the grand opening of the new community center. Never thought I'd say this, Hayes, but you done good. Emmett just smiled. We all did. The ceremony was simple. A brass plaque mounted at the edge of the swamp, now a protected nature preserve alongside the working rigs. Hayes Field, where hope drills deep. The townspeople gathered around as Emmett lifted the covering from a plaque. Cameras flashed. Someone cheered. Priya, now the company's head of operations, handed him a bottle of champagne. Speech. Emmett looked out at the crowd, at Rooster grinning in his best. Only suit, at Mrs. Langley dabbing her eyes, at the kids from the high school who no longer whispered when he passed. Liberty Falls was always a good town, he said, voice rough. It just needed a second chance. We all did. He popped the cork. Upbeat music plays as the camera pans over the thriving town, ending on Emmett shaking hands with workers at the drill site. Text overlay appears. What would you do with a second chance? Comment below. If this story moved you, hit like and share. And remember, sometimes the dirtiest battles lead to the brightest futures. Fade to black. Post-credit scene. A newspaper headline flashes. Disgraced oil tycoon Clayton Boone spotted working as a janitor in Baton Rouge. Before cutting to Emmett, smirking as he tosses a set of keys to an off-screen Boone. Welcome to the job. Smash cut to black.